thank you so much for serving us. Well done.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Adrian. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. It is a real treat and a joy to be invited back. I don't normally get invited back places, so this is a first for me. I hope I can get a third invitation. I brought a friend with me, Ross, one of the elders at the church here from Seaford, and I bring you greetings from the south coast, from Seaford, who someone said to me earlier, is the sea in Seaford? And it is. The Seaford is by the sea, so it's a nice place to live. A bit chilly this time of year, although we do have a sauna, so you can swim in the sea and then go for a sauna afterwards as well, which is nice. Wim Hof would approve. Just before we begin, I want to express my love and appreciation to Adrian and to Julia and for their friendship. I love Adrian and Julia's just passion for the gospel, their love of people, their humility in the way that they serve and have served for many, many years. And it's a real treat to know you, your faith and example in the Lord and in the gospel. So thank you for having me, and thank you for all that you mean to me as well. Now, this morning, I want to speak to you based on a series and some ideas in a book that I read several months ago called The Intimacy Deficit. The premise and the idea behind this book is that you and I, we have all of us been created for intimacy. And by intimacy, I mean closeness or connection. I know intimacy generally is used as a euphemism for sex, but that's not what we're talking about today, so sorry to disappoint you. Instead, intimacy as a word that just means closeness and connection. You've been designed, created with a deep longing within you for connection with another. You've been designed and created for a connection and a close relationship, firstly with God, and secondly with yourself, thirdly with others, and then fourthly with God's world around us. But today I want to speak specifically about that idea that you've been created for deep, close, intimate connections and relationships with other people. In other words, you've been made for friendship. And as we speak about this at the end, I'm going to introduce you to two of the most powerful objects in the world. Objects that are just everyday household objects, but can, I believe, be used to transform the world. You won't even realize their power and potential, but we'll introduce you to that later on. Now, as I mentioned, I'm going to be speaking today about friendship. I know that across the room that will provoke in some people some different reactions. Some of you, I want to acknowledge, will instantly feel a slight pang or hit of anxiety because you feel a sadness or a shame about the fact that you maybe don't feel like you have many friends, or you don't feel as though you have a particularly close friend. But maybe you're someone who's always longed for a best friend, but you've never really found that, and it fills you with deep sadness and anxiety when someone says, let's talk about friendship. You think, oh great, am I going to be made to feel bad about what I don't have? Others of you will know what the pain of feeling let down by friends that you thought you had, or you'll be aware of your lack as a friend. Times where you think, I can't keep up with all the demands of my friends, and I constantly feel like I'm letting people down and failing as a friend. I want to acknowledge that as well. That's a very real and difficult and painful part of friendship. But still, there's others in the room who feel, if you're honest, a deep sense of loneliness a lot of the time. But maybe you're the kind of person who others wouldn't look at and think you're lonely. Because maybe you're the kind of person who's very extroverted and outgoing. You know loads of people. You can talk to everybody. But if you're honest, there's still times where you think, I don't really feel like I have any friends. And so when we start there, let's talk about, as we enter this subject of friendship, let's talk about the experience and the reality that is loneliness. Today, it's quite common and we're quite familiar with the seriousness and the impact of loneliness and the dangers of it on people. In 2018, in the UK, the government appointed a minister for loneliness because they're aware it's a problem for us. And in recent years, we've become increasingly aware of the impact of loneliness on people's mental and physical health as well. In fact, they've said that prolonged periods of loneliness has the equivalent impact on your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. One government website says that loneliness brings with it an increased risk of heart disease, stroke, dementia, anxiety, and depression. And it's often said that loneliness is the starting gun for all other health issues. It's hard to overstate the benefits of friendship for us. And in fact, I thought I'd just share this research with you. A lady called Jean Twenge from the States, who's a statistician, has done a lot of work on the generations. She's recently written a book about Gen Z and the impact of loneliness and mental health on Gen Z and iGen. One of the things that she does, she produced this chart in her book on smartphones to show different things that correlate to feelings of happiness and well-being. The stuff in black is the things that negatively impact people's mental health and their sense of happiness, and the stuff in grey is the stuff that positively has an impact on people's feelings of happiness. You can see at the bottom sort of stuff that we're all familiar with. We know the danger and damage of things like social network and the internet on our mental health. But the stuff that has a positive impact on us, I want you to notice this. Don't worry, teenagers, I'm not going to point out that homework has a positive impact on your happiness. I don't know how that crept into the data. That shouldn't be there, should it? But churches, I think, should make more of this fact that among the top 5 things that are statistically proven that we know has a positive impact on people's feelings of life happiness, sport and exercise, seems pretty obvious, but religious services. Going to church is good for your happiness levels. So if you're feeling lonely or dissatisfied with your life, it is statistically proven that going to church will help you. Just thought I'd share that with you for free. And of course, there, number 3, in-person social interaction. Being with people does you good, sort of thing we'd be aware of. This following statement is true. It is healthier for you and better for you to eat donuts with friends than it is to eat broccoli alone. Yes, amen, right? So you are, as a result of today, free to just go and have donuts with friends, but don't you dare have broccoli on your own, okay? It's bad for you. In fact, kids, it's true. Vegetables are bad for your health. It's proven. But the reality is that fewer people than ever in the UK are actually eating donuts with friends. And it's not because we've gone vegan. It's because 1 in 10 people in the UK say that they have no close friends. And that increases to 1 in 5 people when you survey just men. 1 in 5 men say they have no close friends. In fact, male friendlessness and loneliness is become so familiar to us that perhaps you've heard this joke that the greatest miracle Jesus ever had was the fact that he was a man in his early 30s with 12 male friends. Which is funny, but also, it's sad, isn't it? Many of us have relationships built often around our work life. It dominates so much of our time. But once our working week ends, then what? Maybe you can relate to the experience of Mark Gaisford, who was a 52-year-old businessman who went viral one week after posting on the LinkedIn website the fact, he made a video and admitting on this video that I have no friends, he said. In a follow-up piece for the Daily Mail, Mark Gaisford wrote this. He said, I'm perhaps the most outgoing on the team, and I like to see myself as the joker of the bunch. But when the clock hits 5 p.m. on a Friday and the 20-somethings disappear off to the pub, I slink off home alone, he writes. The journalist for The Guardian, a woman called Paula Kokoza, she dubs what she calls the experience of weekend loneliness, a phenomena that's increasingly familiar to people. She writes in this article about a man named Peter. Peter describes his Monday to Friday life as being like a tunnel made up of an intense job in the big smoke involving a long commute from Brighton to London. But then he says this, but the days in between are a different story. He says, across the whole of Saturday and Sunday, the only person I spoke to was the lady who came over to verify my bottles of beer at the self-checkout. There's another problem that we have. When we do talk about our friends, particularly I hear this sort of thing among men, when we do talk about our friends, we say things like, or we talk about friends as though they are like the fourth emergency service. So perhaps you've heard someone say, oh yeah, my mate Gareth, I know Gareth would be there for me in a blink of an eye. If a crisis happened or if ever I needed Gareth, Gareth would be there. He would step in front of a bus for me. Gareth, oh yeah, he's definitely my best friend. When did you last see Gareth? 1985. But we talk about friends as though they are an emergency service. which is to say that it isn't just people that we need in our lives, but intimacy, closeness with people. The author Robert Putnam said this, that the single most common finding from half a century's research on the correlates of life satisfaction is that happiness is best predicted by the breadth and depth of one's social connections. The breadth and depth of one's social connections. And so I invite you, as we open the Bible now, to take something of a health audit when it comes to your relationships. We're going to look at the Bible and friendship, and then we'll talk something about the barriers of friendship before coming into land and sharing the communion meal that Jesus gave us. Let's start with this then, the Bible and friendship. Now, there once was a man who had the world at his feet. He had a perfect relationship with God. It was said of this man that he walked with God in the garden in the cool of the day. And the Bible's verdict of this man, or God's verdict of this man, was that it is not good for him to be alone. It was in Genesis chapter 2. Before sin had entered the world, Adam had a perfect, close relationship with God, and God said, it's not good that he's alone. He needs a helper. He needs a companion. And it isn't just that Adam needs a wife in the story, because God parades all of these animals in front of him for companionship. It's intimacy and companionship that he's looking for. Because I want to start by saying something fairly controversial, but I think it's biblical. God alone is not enough to meet all of your needs for intimacy. God alone is not enough to meet all of the needs that you have and that you've been designed by God to have for intimacy. And neither is the Bible's answer to our intimacy deficit. Neither is the Bible's answer to that need marriage. I mean, historically, it's a very recent phenomena that we have elevated marriage to being the primary relationship where all of our needs for emotional and intimate connection are to be found. Now that's an expectation. But the Disneyfication of marriage, we might call it, is something that's as recent as the 18th, came into play as recently as the 18th and 19th centuries. And as a result of the Disneyfication of marriage and the overloading of marriage with all of our expectations for intimacy and emotional connection, as a result of that, many people are talking about how marriages are buckling under the pressure that we put on them. The journalist Andrew Sullivan, he writes this. He says that families and marriages fail too often because they're trying to answer too many human needs. A spouse is required to be a lover, a friend, a mother, a father, a soulmate, a co-worker, and so on. Few people can be all of these things for one person, and when demands are set too high, disappointment can only follow. God's answer to our intimacy deficit may include marriage for some, but it's not limited to that. In fact, if in a marriage a husband or a wife has deep, strong relationships or friendships outside of marriage, then the marriage has more space to breathe and fewer burdens to bear. And I want us to look at 3 examples of friendship then in the Bible. And we'll start with perhaps the most famous example of friendship in the Bible, and that is the friendship that existed between King David and the son of Saul, the other king at the time, Jonathan, the friendship between Jonathan and David. Jonathan, as I said, is the son of King Saul. David was the promised future king of the nation. And because of that, there's a great suspicion towards David by Saul, Jonathan's father, and so friendship between the two of them is hard. Nevertheless, it says of David that he loved Jonathan as his own soul. It's in 1 Samuel 18. And it says there as well that Jonathan made a covenant with David. That's a binding, solemn promise. Made a covenant with David. He loved him so much. I want us to read a few verses from 1 Samuel chapter 20. And the context of these verses is that King David, or David, he's not yet king, David is living as an outlaw in Israel at the time. And because Jonathan's father Saul is out to kill him, and the friendship between Jonathan and David has been restricted as a result of that. Nevertheless, they arrange a secret meeting place to be together. And in 1 Samuel 20, verses 35 to 41, it says this. In the morning, Jonathan went out to the field for his meeting with David. he had a young servant with him, and he said to the servant, "Run and find the arrows that I shoot." And as the boy ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. When the boy got to where Jonathan's arrow had fallen, Jonathan called after him, "Isn't the arrow beyond you?" he said. Then he shouted, "Hurry, go quickly, don't stop." The boy picked up the arrow and returned to his master. And then Jonathan gave him his weapons and said to the boy, "Go carry my weapons back into town." After the boy had gone, David got up from the south side of the stone and bowed down before Jonathan 3 times with his face to the ground. And then they kissed each other and they wept together. But David wept the most, which is how you know it's a male friendship, because it's competitive. I cried the most. What we read there is a description of a very close, intimate relationship between 2 men that's entirely one of friendship, but that has a lot of physical affection and involvement in intimacy as well. At Jonathan's death, David weeps. It says in 2 Samuel chapter 1 that he says, "Jonathan's love for me was more wondrous than the love of a woman." It's fair to say that a friendship, an intimate relationship between 2 men like that is rare to see in a society like ours. Male friendship, intimate, close relationship between 2 men has become harder in the last 100 years, not easier. Harder in part because of people like the psychologist Freud, who sexualized our psychology and said all of our desires are really about a longing for sexual conquest or connection. And therefore, as a result of that, a lot of men with their close relationships and even physical contact between men has become restricted and no longer something that we see or feel comfortable about. These days, it's much more common to mock male friendship or to poke fun at it than it is to see it or to recognize it. When 2 men are particularly close, we call it a bromance. Or when 2 men go out for a drink, we call it a mandate, because we romanticize and sexualize our friendships to the point that they become hard for us. And this wasn't always the case in society. And in fact, in many parts of the world, it still isn't the case. I remember several years ago, I visited Kenya, and I remember walking down the street with a Kenyan man who I'd met over the past month. We'd been ministering together. We're walking down the middle of Nairobi on a busy day, and he just takes my hand and holds it. And we're walking down the street holding hands. And I thought to myself, okay, so we're doing this. This is new. But before Freud, it was normal for people of the same sex to have a non-sexual, intimate friendship. It wasn't uncommon. In fact, it was common in different times, particularly because of poverty. It was common for friends to share a bed together. A famous example among them would be Abraham Lincoln and his friend Joshua Speed, who for 4 years, because of their poverty, lived together and shared a bed together for warmth. Intimacy between friends is a gift. Sometimes, being part of churches like this, we go to conferences and there isn't the budget to give people their own room. Sometimes not even the budget to give people their own bed. And so I know a friend of mine who on one occasion had to go to a New Day youth workers conference at Center Parks. You remember back in those days if you were around? And he arrived late at the conference, so late that the evening session had finished, everyone had gone off to sleep. And my friend soon discovered that he'd been booked to share a double bed with a man he'd never met before. And it's so funny. My friend says he didn't know what to do, so he just crawled into bed, tapped the man on the shoulder and said, "Hi, I'm Ollie." And then just went to sleep. And he said for the whole weekend at this conference, it was so awkward. Every time he saw him across the kind of conference, they kind of looked at each other and kind of went about their separate ways. Just, that's my friend Ollie. In fact, I find it quite funny now to just go to a conference and just book a double bed and share a bed with him. But that's a different story altogether. Now, pastorally, I do understand that if you're someone who is sexually attracted to people of the same sex as you, an intimate relationship with someone of the same sex that isn't sexual is going to be harder for you. But nevertheless, you mustn't avoid it or be afraid of it. You are created. You and I have been created for intimacy. We need close connections with other people. And by intimacy, we don't mean sex. You haven't been created. It is not a core human need to have sex. But it is a core human need to have intimacy and love between people. So in the Bible, we can see examples of intimate, affectionate, supportive, same-sex friendships, and we see that as being fairly normal. The next friendship I want to consider is one between Naomi and Ruth, two women in the Old Testament. It says in Ruth chapter 1, verse 16, that Naomi, it says this, so the story, back context. Ruth is Naomi's daughter-in-law, but Ruth's husband dies. And so Ruth is told by Naomi to go back to where she came from, but instead, this is what happens. Naomi said, look, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people. Why don't you follow your sister-in-law? But Ruth replied, don't plead with me to abandon you or to return and not follow you. For wherever you go, I will go. And wherever you live, I will live. And your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Ruth binds herself. Where you die, I will, Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord punish me and do so severely if anything but death separates you and me. Ruth binds herself to Naomi in a time of extreme vulnerability in life and death, making a solemn, quite serious promise. So help me God if I am not a friend to you in this time. If I ever leave you, may God treat me very severely. This is an example of, yes, friendship, but also an example of what we might term intergenerational friendship between a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law. Intergenerational friendship. Being friends with someone of a different generation to you. Do you have people in your life like that? People who are maybe 20 years older or younger than you? It's a very precious gift. The philosopher James K.A. Smith calls this kind of friendship, he says it's akin to time travel. When you have a friend who's 20 years of a different generation to you. It's like traveling through time. I have a friend, a woman in the church called Margaret, and every few weeks or so we get together. We might go out for lunch sometimes. She comes around our house. She often buys my kids Christmas presents, and I count her a friend. And being friends with Margaret means that I have access to life experience, memories, and wisdom that I am not old enough to have acquired myself. I don't know what it was like, say, in different decades before I was around, but she tells me. And equally, she, through me, has access to whatever's going on in my generation or younger. Intergenerational friendship allows us to stretch the borders of time and inhabit a much broader plane of life. It's thrilling. And it's one of the thrilling things, I think, that we get from belonging to and being part of church communities. Where else in a society that's as fractured as ours, where else do you get to rub shoulders with people who are 20 years your senior on a level of equality and friendship? It's a real gift. Do we make the most of that gift, I wonder? Third, I want us to consider the range of friendship across the Bible. Jesus had, as we're familiar with, 12 male friends. But among those 12 disciples, he also had 3 particularly close friends. And among that 3, he even had one that was termed the disciple whom Jesus loved, a particularly close relationship. And I would say that you and I, for health, need all of those relationships in our lives. You need a 12 kind of existence. That's where you've got a lot of people in your life, acquaintances, friends, people that you maybe play sport with or see on social occasions. You need a 3, people that you can share slightly deeper conversations and share more of your home and your heart with. But then you also need a 1, someone that you do feel particularly vulnerable around and you give yourself to. And where you don't have a 12, a 3, or a 1, you'll probably experience a sense of lack or emotional, relational, intimate health deficiency. Jesus with his disciples is, again, a great example of friendship, and that it's a God-given good thing, and how actually to build friendship. Jesus told his disciples when he was in need. Picture that. The Son of God told his friends when he had needs. He asked for their support. He asked for their prayer. He didn't wait for his disciples to say, is there anything we can do to pray for you, Jesus? He said, I am burdened, pray for me. He said, stay awake and pray for me. And we know famously they let him down. And actually at Jesus' death, we see another example of a close friendship that Jesus had and the fruit of it. In John chapter 19, verse 26, when Jesus is being crucified and he's hanging on the cross, some of his last words are words to his friend. It says this, that when Jesus on the cross saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved, he said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." And then he said to his disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her into his home. This is the Apostle John being told by Jesus in his dying breath, "Please take care of my mother." The Apostle John, who just hours before, Jesus had been resting at dinner with his head on the chest of John. Such was their intimate friendship. I put it to you that if you were to die today, and do you have someone that you could rely on to help you with your aging parents or to look after your mum? If you do, then you have the kind of friend that Jesus had. So in the Bible, we see that we're built for intimacy with others, and that intimacy and friendship is not something that's restricted only to marriage. In the Bible, you see examples of opposite-sex friendships. We see that between Jesus and Mary. You see friendships between people of the same age and at different life stages. You also see a diverse range of friendships, people across different cultures and political lines who are friends. Jesus' 12 disciples that he picked, among them, he had tax collectors who were colluding with the Romans to take money off the Israelites to give to the Romans, and he had zealots who liked to kill the Romans as their solution to the troubles, and he put them together in a life group and said, "Happy church." That's the kind of friendship or church community that Jesus is building. He's building church communities of people from across political divides, brings them together, centered around him, and says, "You're friends together. Work it out." We wonder why there's a lot of dysfunction sometimes in churches. It's normal. It's always been this way. We might even say it's part of Jesus' design for church. So that's the Bible and friendship. I want us to think now about barriers to friendship. Because you might not need a lot of convincing about the value of friendship. Yeah, of course, I need a friend. Friendship is good. But what we do often need help with, I think, is overcoming some of the barriers or hindrances that prevent us from having the kind of friends that the Bible describes. We'll look at 2 practical ones and 3 personal ones. Practical ones, moving and busyness. Moving. And it's great to live in a world like this, isn't it? A world where there's social mobility. Where people often don't live in the town that they grew up in. They leave to go to work or to university or for other reasons, move around a lot. That's great to be in a society like that. We can do that. But it does make forming deep, lasting friendships hard. We've got to acknowledge that. Many of you, I know, have moved schools or houses multiple times through your lives. It means making friendships, close relationships, hard. Sometimes in church, we call this mission, don't we? The cost of mission is often that we don't live near people that we have close friendships with. It's painful. And if that is you, first thing you need to hear is just grace. Like, give yourself grace. The Lord knows the cost, the sacrifice, and the pain of that. Give yourself time. Don't be hard on yourself. Second thing, in the words of a dear older lady in my church, she has moved around a lot, and I said to her, "What's the secret?" And she said to me, "Oh, my dear," she says, "blossom where you're planted. Wherever you find yourself, be all there. Shop local. Go for coffee local. Go invest locally." It's very easy to just, if I want to see my friends, travel half an hour to go be with the friendships that I had before I lived where I am now. It's very easy to do that. But live locally, invest locally. Connect with the people in this room, maybe the ones that you don't know. Walk across the room. Look for people who don't look like you, who have different life experience to you, different generation to you. Invest there. Second practical one is busyness. Might be for many of us the biggest reason why making friends is hard. We work long hours. We have demanding schedules. You often leave when it's dark, get home when it's dark. There is little room in your life, I know, for the unhurried, time-rich, slow-pace rhythm that often is required to grow intimate relationships. Many of you have the experience of squeezing in a social life. And we've just got to acknowledge, as good as that is, squeezing in a social life will be good for establishing acquaintances, but it will be hard for forming friendships. 3 practical barriers to friendship to consider. First is fear. Fear. Putting yourself out to form a friendship with someone is scary. What if you get rejected? What if you think you're a closer friend with someone than they think you are? That's something that's a real fear, isn't it? You know, I remember, again, a friend of mine, a church leader, who tells a story of building a friendship with someone in the church, and then one day saying to him, "Are we friends? I think we're friends. Are we friends?" And he's like, "Yeah, I think you're a mate." He's like, "Oh, good, yeah, good." That can be hard. It's scary. How do you play that game? I know when we moved to the town that we're in, when we planted the church, Amy and I felt that for a long time we were dating people for friendship. Like, how close can I get? I don't want to be too keen. I don't want to text them. I've just texted them. I don't want to text them back. I want to play. And it's that kind of psychological game of like, it's just a guy I'm wanting to go for a beer with. Can I text him? Can I look keen? Is it okay to look keen when making friends? All of that goes through our minds, doesn't it? And it's scary. Intimacy with other people is both something that we desire and also that we find really threatening. But we've got to be honest that in order for friendship to develop, we need to make ourselves vulnerable with other people at times. It isn't strength that binds people together, but weakness. When someone reveals a strength to you, and so if they show you something they're good at, you're impressed. But if someone reveals a weakness to you, you're drawn closer to them. Many of us live our lives, this is what social media is designed for, we live our lives trying to impress people. Well, it's no wonder we're lonely. Because to build a friendship requires me showing you my weaknesses and my fears and my vulnerabilities. And actually, as I disclose a part of me that's vulnerable and weak, and you do the same, you reciprocate, we move closer together. And that's how friendships are established. Next, related to fear is pride. We fear seeming weak. We fear looking vulnerable, partly because we're proud. I want to impress you. We want to impress others. And so we find it hard to articulate our needs and honestly say to people, "I really need some company. Can you help?" When did you last contact someone and say that? "I'm feeling lonely. Can I come round? Or can you come round to mine?" There's a woman on our church prayer group just yesterday, actually, I thought it was remarkably courageous. She just said, "I'm really struggling. Can people pray for me? Or can someone come visit me? I'm just lonely." I thought it takes courage to do that. Often when we feel like this, you instinctively think, "Oh, I don't want to impose myself on other people. I don't want to impose," which is understandable. It's kind of you. But if the tables were turned, how would you feel if someone imposed themselves on you? Well, you'd often feel quite honored. "Oh, they've asked for help. I love that." Many of us, though, if we're honest, we prefer to suffer in silence than we do to tell people. We'd rather suffer in silence and just cope with the pain of loneliness than we would humble ourselves and say, "Please help." Lastly, idealism is a barrier to friendship. If we've talked about the Disneyfication of marriage, there's also the Disneyfication of friendship, isn't there? Because many of us have the experience where I don't want to make a friend, I want to discover one. You know? And I think sometimes people talk about friendship like this. "I just found her, and she sees the world exactly the same as me, and it's wonderful." C.S. Lewis is a bit guilty of this in his book on friendship. He says that a true friend is someone who sees the same thing as you, and you go, "Oh, you too? Like you too?" If we're honest, when we think about friendship, you think, "Oh, someone isn't a friend unless they've been discovered rather than made." I don't want to make a friend. In fact, some person writes about this. They say, "I want all of my friends to come up like weeds, and I want to be a weed myself, spontaneous and unstoppable. I don't want the kind of friends that one has to cultivate. I don't want to have to work at friendship. I just want it to appear." But the truth is, most friendships need to be worked at. They need work. Spontaneously and miraculously, you produce contacts. Friends and friendship takes work. And while we're at it, friendship requires leadership. You know, we've all been in those groups where you're like, "No one ever invites me out." I'm like, "Would you ever invite anyone out?" No. It requires leadership. Someone to say, "We're going to go for a lads' weekend away, playing golf and having a spa." I mean, that's more of a ladies' weekend, isn't it? A spa. Although I like spas, you know. No, I don't. Why did I say that? Anyway, external processing gets me into trouble sometimes and discloses parts of me I don't want to reveal. Max Dickens, who writes a book on male loneliness, he says that friendship has a rhythm. Friendship has a rhythm. And often because of the busyness and pace of life, we can fall out of that rhythm. And we then often wake up one day and think to ourselves, "Where have all my friends gone?" Because we stop dancing or moving to the rhythm of friendship. You've got to work out the rhythm of friendship for people in your lives. Now, last year, I think part of the reason I'm passionate about this is because last year I experienced quite a prolonged period of loneliness myself and found that really quite painful. I had, for about a year, I had a pain in my sciatic nerve as a result of a slipped disc that gradually got worse and worse and worse, which meant that I was able to do less and less and less. And by about July, I was unable to walk more than 10 or 20 yards without being in so much pain I needed to sit down. It was very, very painful. But the offshoot of this was that I was becoming more and more isolated and lonely because I couldn't do the sorts of things I did to be around people. Couldn't play sport, couldn't go to a running club, couldn't really do much at all. And I remember one particular morning in November, this had gone on for a year and a half, and just waking up, suddenly feeling unable to sleep, rather, as you know, your mind just goes to these places, unable to sleep, just thinking about how all the times I used to see people, all the times I used to have friends, and feeling this horrible pain of loneliness. Some of us will be familiar with that. The thing I learned, though, from reading and thinking about this was that loneliness and feeling lonely isn't something that should scare us. Instead, we should relate to feelings of loneliness like we relate to other appetites or desires that we feel. When I feel pangs of hunger, I don't panic. I don't freak out. I go to the fridge. When I feel desperately thirsty, again, I don't get really distraught about it. I just go pour myself a drink. And I think loneliness and feelings of loneliness is like that. It's your relational appetite saying, we're hungry. You need people. You need some people in your life. Reach out. What will you do with those lonely pangs? Will they help you to reach out? And as we land, then, those are our barriers to friendship, Bible and friendship. And now I just want to come in to land and enter the time where we're going to share the communion meal that Jesus gave us. But as we do that, I just want to introduce you to two of the most powerful objects in the world. Objects that exist in probably every home in the room that you use day in, day out without ever really thinking about their power. But these objects have the power to transform the world. And if we're honest, in a society that's increasingly polarized and fractured like ours, these objects have the power and potential to heal the divides in our society. Big claim. You want to know what those objects are? A knife and fork. Hospitality. I know it's cheesy and lame. I'm sorry. Hospitality is one of the most powerful forces in the world. As isolation increases, we can expect to see polarization increase. And you know how you destroy that hostility? You invite people into your home. You invite people into your life. You eat with them. It starts every Sunday, doesn't it? Sunday by Sunday. When we see someone we don't know, we reach out to get to know them. Most households, the most prominent piece of furniture in the house is the table. And that's true not just of our domestic households, but it's true of the family of God as well. Jesus invites us, and he invites us in a moment to come to the table and sit in communion with God himself. Jesus said this in John 15, "This is my command, love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down his life for his friends." Jesus laid his life down for you as an invitation for friendship with God. And as we share the communion meal in a moment, we're going to celebrate the friendship that Jesus invites us to as well. A restoration of that walking with God in the cool of the day that Jesus came to bring you. And we taste some of that every time we strengthen friendships with people around us. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for the gift of friendship that you've given us as people. We want to acknowledge our appetite and our need for intimacy with others. And I ask that you would help us, God, where we're feeling lonely and disconnected. Lord, we're going to celebrate and rejoice in the fact that you have offered yourself for us, your body broken, your blood poured out for us as a sign of friendship. You made yourself weak so that we could come to the Father. Lord, as we eat this meal together, would you use it, Lord, to nourish our spirits? And as we do that, God, would you speak to us practically, Lord, about all that you're wanting us to follow you and trust you in where our friendships are concerned? Amen. I'd love to invite the hosting team, please, to come and pass around the bread and the wine. The band will lead us in a song, and then if you could hold it together, we'll share it as one body, though many we're one in Christ, in a moment as well. So let's stand to our feet as this comes around.
Hey guys, before you go, we just want to say a massive thank you for watching this video today. My name's Chris. I'm part of the leadership team here at the Beacon Church. You know, as a church, we have a big vision. We believe that we exist to help people to know God, to find freedom, to discover their purpose, and to make a difference. If this video has made a difference in your life today, then make sure you check out our other content in our playlist. We believe it's going to really help you out. And don't forget to like and subscribe as you go. Well, that's all from me today. Take care. God bless.